Hungarian Folk Tales. The Diligent Girl and the Lazy Girl. Once upon a time, there lived an old man and an old woman, and each had a daughter from their previous marriage. The old woman was always angry with her husband's daughter and did not like her the slightest bit. Things went from bad to worse until one day the old woman chased the girl away from home, saying that she should seek work with a rich family. The girl walked and was walking past a pear tree when the tree spoke to her. "Where are you going?" "I'm going to find a job as a servant with a rich family," the young girl replied. "Come here and rid me of my dry branches, and I will do you a good deed in return." Then the young girl walked on her way until she passed a grapevine, and the vine spoke to her. "Come here and hoe around my roots, and I will do you a good deal in return." Then the young girl walked on her way until she passed a crumbling oven. "Please come here and make me tidy and clean, and I will do you a good deed in return." Then the young girl walked on her way until she came across a broken-down well. "Where are you going?" "I journey to find work. Please come here and make me tidy and clean, and I will do you a good deed in return." So the young girl did as she was bid and bailed the stale water out of the well and walked on her way until she met a tiny dog. And the dog said, "Please wash me, brush me and trim me, and I will do you a good deal in return." The young girl cleaned and trimmed the dog, and the dog thanked her, and she walked on her way until she saw a beautiful house. There were fairies living in the house. The fairies asked the purpose of her journey, and so the young girl told them. Then the fairies said, "Why don't you stay here and become our servant? There are 7 rooms. You have to sweep out 6 rooms every day, but you must never go to the 7th room." So the young girl worked for a year and a day, and at the end of the year, the young girl said, "I would like to leave now and go home to show my parents what I've earned." "You have been a faithful maid," the fairies said. "You did as you were told, so now we will tell you what you have earned. Come here and lie down atop these gold coins. Roll over, and whatever sticks to you is yours. And now go and roll over on the silver coins, and whatever sticks to you is yours." The girl did as she was told, then stood up and bid farewell to the fairies. On her way home, she came across the little dog again that said, "Come here and take as many pearls as you wish." The dog was covered in pearls, and the young girl took the pearls and hung them around her neck. She walked on her way until she reached the well again, where jugs hung so that people could drink from its sweet water. The young girl was thirsty, and so she took a drink and walked on her way. When she reached the oven again, she noticed it was filled with bread and cake, and the oven said, "Come here and eat your fill in return for your good deed." She ate as much as she could, packed more to take home, and then walked on her way. Next she reached the grapevine that hung heavy with ripe fruit. So here the girl stopped and ate and drank as much as she could. Then the girl walked on her way again until she came to the pear tree, and the pear tree said, "I've been waiting for you, as all my pears are ripe." As the girl neared home, the cockerel crowed to announce her arrival. "Cock-a-doodle-doo! My mistress is coming home covered in silver and gold." The young girl heard the cockerel's call and ran home to bring joy at last to her old father. "Cock-a-doodle-doo! My mistress is coming home covered in silver and gold." The old woman shouted, "Be quiet! That's not true." Once again the cockerel said, "Cock-a-doodle-doo! My mistress is coming home covered in silver and gold." The old woman said, "You've earned very nicely indeed, but now my own daughter will go forth and work for a rich family, and she will earn a great deal more than you've managed." When the old woman's daughter reached the pear tree, it said, "Come here and rid me of my dry branches, and I will do you a good deal in return." The girl said, "I will not ruin my pretty white hands and my lovely tiny feet, no matter what happens." When the girl reached the grapevine, it asked her to hoe its roots and to expect a good deal in return. But once again, the girl refused to do anything that might ruin her pretty white hands and her lovely tiny feet, no matter what happened. Next, she reached the oven. The oven asked her to repair it and it would do her a good deed in return. But the girl said she would not ruin her pretty white hands and her lovely tiny feet with disgusting mud and clay no matter what happened. Next she came to the broken down well. "Please come here and make me tidy and clean." But again she refused to dirty her pretty white hands and her lovely tiny feet, no matter what happened. Then she met the little dog that said, "Come here and trim me." But she refused to touch the dog because she would not dirty her pretty white hands and her lovely tiny feet, no matter what happened. Next she reached the beautiful big house and asked that she be allowed to sleep there for the night. The fairies living there asked her where she was going, and so she told them. In reply, they asked her to stay and work as their maid. They said, "Here there are 6 rooms, and you must sweep them every day, but you must never enter the 7th room." The girl did as she was told and swept the 6 rooms every day and ignored the 7th. But after a while, her curiosity forced her to open the door to the 7th room. To her horror, she saw that it was filled with frogs and snakes, and they bit her and stung her so terribly that by the time she managed to escape, she was covered in blood. And so she left the fairy's house with no payment at all. On her way home, she met the dog and went up to ask for some pearls. The dog said, "You refused to help me, and now I refuse to help you." The girl reached the well and was very thirsty, but was not allowed to drink. When she reached the oven, it was packed with fresh bread and cakes, but she could not eat any of them because when she reached inside for some, it burned her hands terribly. When she reached the grapevine, she tried to pick a bunch of grapes and to drink a glass of wine, but the grapevine pushed her hand away. And when she reached the pear tree, she could not pick a single pear. As she neared home, the cockerel caught sight of her and flew to the top of the fence and let it be known to everyone that, "Cock-a-doodle-doo, my mistress is coming all covered in blood." The old woman went to the fence and said, "That's not true, she's covered in gold." But the cockerel repeated, "Cock-a-doodle-doo, my mistress is coming all covered in blood." The old woman said, "That's not true, because she's covered in gold." The cockerel repeated, "Cock-a-doodle-doo, here comes my mistress all covered in blood." "That's not true, that's not true," shouted the old lady. But the old man said, "Now you can see that my daughter earned more as a maid than yours ever did." This led to such a quarrel that the old woman and her daughter left the old man's home. Then the old man and his daughter lived happily ever after. Hungarian Folk Tales. Pinko. Once upon a time, there lived an old woodcutter who was poorer than a mouse. One day the woodcutter said to his wife, "Wife of mine, please bake me 2 corn cakes that I can take them out to work with me so that I won't have to come home to eat." So the woodcutter's wife baked the cakes, put them in the woodcutter's bag, and he set off to work in the forest. Down in the forest lived old Paluto, and old Paluto had a young son called Pinko. Pinko listened keenly to the sound of the woodcutter's axe and watched the old woodcutter from the shadows. Then the crafty boy took the woodcutter's bag down and gobbled up both the corn cakes. But old Paluto got wind of what his son had done. "Where are you, Pinko?" old Paluto called out to his son. "Here I am, father." "Come quickly, where have you been?" "I have just gobbled up the old woodcutter's corn cakes." "As you felt no pity for the poor woodcutter, you will now have to serve for 3 long years in return. Do you understand?" This news saddened Pinko, but he agreed to do his father's bidding. So he turned on his heels and went back to the woodcutter. When he arrived, he said, "Woodcutter, I am the one who ate your corn cakes. So be happy, my child, and don't sound so sad. But it doesn't work like that because my father has punished me and told me that I should work as your servant for 3 long years. There is no need, my child, because I could never pay you, but I can earn my own living." And wonder of wonders, Pinko plucked the trees from the ground and knocked them together to make neat logs to be stacked. By the time night came, he had cleared the whole forest. "Can we go home now?" "Yes, but first I want to gather some sticks for the fire." Pinko set hard to work and gathered up so much firewood that even 20 oxen could not have carted it home. Then he lifted the poor woodcutter up and placed him on top of the pile. The very next day, the poor woodcutter went to the rich farmer to tell him that he had felled, cut and stacked all the wood for winter. The farmer was reluctant to believe him, and so he sent servants to see for themselves. They returned in the evening and informed him that the forest had been cleared and neatly stacked for winter. So the rich farmer was forced to pay the poor woodcutter. Then the woodcutter made his way home, where he and Pinko agreed that they should seek work with the Baron the very next day. "You came at the very best time," the Baron told them, "because the field I have to plough would take 100 men, a year and a day to complete." So the old man went to the market with Pinko, where they purchased 2 young calves and then went back to the field to plough it. There were very many men ploughing with a dozen oxen. So Pinko strode out to the middle of the field, and by noon he had already ploughed more than all the other men put together. The other workers were so impressed by Pinko's calves that they asked for what price he would gladly sell them. But Pinko was proud of the calves and asked for a sack of gold along with the 12 oxen. They bargained and bargained until the Baron agreed to pay Pinko's asking price. The sack of gold was measured out for him, he was given the 12 oxen, and then he was sent on his way. The Baron's men began to plough the land with the 2 calves, but however they pulled and pushed the tiny beasts, they would not work. They quickly reported the bad news to the Baron, who ordered them to search for Pinko and bring him back at once. The men soon caught Pinko. Then Pinko took the handle of the plough in one hand, cracked his whip with the other, and the calves began to plough as never before. "This is how you should do it," he told them, and he went home. Back at home, he and the woodcutter discussed where Pinko should next seek work, and they agreed that he should visit the king the very next day. You came at the very best time, the king told them, because the corn I have to thresh would take 100 men a year and a day to complete. They went to the barn that was piled to the rafters with corn to be threshed. But Pinko grabbed one stack and threshed it in no time at all. Then he took all the rest of the wheat, oats, millet and barley and threshed it all before the day was done. Then Pinko went to the king to tell him the corn was threshed. "Oh, but you shouldn't have done it like that." "Why, what did I do wrong? The wheat, the barley, the oats and the millet should be separate." "That's no matter. I shall sort them apart." And no sooner had he spoken than, wonder of wonders, the grain all stood in neat piles. "What payment do you ask for your hard work, son?" "Only 1 sack of wheat," Pinko said. "Very well, you may come and collect it whenever you wish." Pinko returned home, and he and the woodcutter gathered all the canvas they could find and spent a week sewing the sack. Now let's go and collect our payment. The next day they reported to the king, who ordered his bailiff to fill Pinko's sack with wheat in payment for his work. Then they went to the barn and began to fill the sack and shovel all the grain in that Pinko had threshed. But that was only enough to fill one small corner of the sack. So the farm bailiff went back to the king and told him the size of the sack that Pinko had sewn. The king said, "I have agreed, and so I shall pay, but he will never be able to take the big sack away with him." So the men continued to fill the sack with last year's grain and the grain from the year before, and the sack still was not full when they had used up wheat from the last 10 years. "What kind of king is this man who cannot pay me for an honest day's work?" Pinko complained to the bailiff. Then Pinko took the enormous sack and swung it over his shoulder, and he and the poor woodcutter left for home. They walked away without even saying goodbye, and when they got home, there was much celebration. Now they had grain, wood, oxen and gold, and could at last live a happy life. As the months turned to years, Pinko said to the woodcutter, "I have been with you now for 3 long years, so I will leave you in the morning." The woodcutter pleaded and appealed for him to stay, but Pinko left for home. And when Pinko got home, there was much celebration, and they all lived happily ever after. Hungarian Folk Tales. The Hare and the Hedgehog. One sunny summer day, a hare and a hedgehog met in the meadow. The hare began to tease the hedgehog and said, "Hey, hedgehog, how can you even walk alone, let run with those stumpy little legs of yours?" This upset the hedgehog. "Well, I'm sure I can run faster with my little legs than you can run with your lanky long ones." Now the hare was upset. "I don't believe that." "Well, if you don't believe it, hare, let's make a wager." So the two of them placed their wagers, and then the hare said to the hedgehog, "Well then, hedgehog, shall we race?" To this the hedgehog said, "Tomorrow morning, when the 8 o'clock train leaves the station." The hare said, "But why not now, hedgehog? Because I have to go home to eat my supper. Let's meet again here tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock sharp." So the hedgehog went home. After they had eaten, the hedgehog told his wife what had happened. "Just imagine, I made a wager with the hare that I can run faster than him." The hedgehog's wife said, "Don't be foolish. How could you possibly run faster than the hare?" "Well, we'll find that out tomorrow morning." The following morning, the hedgehogs got up, ate a hearty breakfast, and went out to the meadow. They didn't go to the place where they should meet the hare, but instead stood at the other end of the meadow. Then the hedgehog told his wife to hide herself in a furrow. He told her, "When the hare arrives, you are to shout out, 'I'm already here, hare!'" Then the hedgehog walked to the far end of the meadow where he met the hare. "Hello there, hare." "Hello there, hedgehog. Are you ready to race?" "Yes, I am." "Then shall we run?" "Yes, let's run." "But how shall we run over such a bumpy field?" The hedgehog said, "It's simple. I shall run in one furrow and you in another, and so we won't bump into each other while we're racing." "That sounds like a very good idea." Then the hare stood ready in one furrow and the hedgehog in another, and the hedgehog told the hare, "I shall count, and when I get to 3, we start to run." And then the hedgehog counted, 1, 2, 3. Then they both began to run, but the hedgehog only ran 2 steps and hid himself deep in the furrow. But the hedgehog's wife was sitting waiting at the other end of the meadow when the hare arrived, and she shouted, "I'm already here, hare!" And the hare said, "That was no good. Let's race again." Then they turned back and began to run in the opposite direction, but this time the hedgehog's wife only ran 2 steps and hid herself deep in the furrow. The hare did his best to run faster than he had ever run before. But when the hare arrived back at the beginning of the meadow, the hedgehog said, "I'm already here, hare." That was no good. Let's race once more. So they turned around and ran back again, but the hedgehog quickly hid in the furrow again. The poor hare ran as fast as his legs would carry him, and when he got to the other end of the meadow, the hedgehog's wife said, "I'm already here, hare." "That was no good," said the hare. "Let's run one last time." But the foolish hare felt dizzy and his legs began to tremble, and he stood in the middle of the meadow, too tired to continue. The little hedgehogs laughed at the silly hare. They had won. The pair of them laughed all the way home, and they are probably still laughing to this very day.